The Tyranid Hive Fleets are the single greatest threat the Milky Way has ever faced, and it's not even close. We're talking about a galaxy-spanning superorganism that sends entire civilizations through a biological meat grinder, learns from every single loss, and comes back hungrier. Today, I'm breaking down every major hive fleet and what makes each one terrifying in its own way, starting with the one that kicked the door down, Behemoth. Behemoth was the galaxy's first real introduction to the Tyranids, and it went about as well as you'd expect when an endless tide of alien bioforms shows up with zero warning. Arriving around 745 M41 near the galactic south, this was the hive mind's opening move, and that strategy was run at them. That's it, that's the whole plan. Behemoth was pure aggression, massive biomass waves, zero tactical sophistication. It didn't flank, it didn't feint, it just threw bodies at the problem until the problem stopped existing. Think of it as the tutorial boss of galactic extinction. Terrifying in the moment, embarrassingly simple in hindsight. The Ultramarines and combined Imperial forces finally broke Behemoth at the Battle of McCraig, and the Imperium celebrated like they'd won the war. They had it. They'd won a skirmish against the hive mind's first draft. Here's where it gets dark. Behemoth's defeat might have been the worst possible outcome for the galaxy. Every tactic the Imperium deployed, every weapon that worked, all of that data fed back into the hive mind. Some fans argue Behemoth was never meant to win. It was a probe, a taste test, and when it died, it sent back a very detailed report on exactly how to crack humanity open. The galaxy got its warning. Nobody understood what it actually meant, but if Behemoth was a blunt instrument, the fleet that came next wasn't much sharper. Moloch. Every hive fleet on this list has some kind of gimmick, some clever adaptation, some terrifying trick that makes them unique. Moloch doesn't have one. Moloch just hits things really, really hard. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. Here's the thing about Moloch. It favors frontal assault tactics with an almost comical commitment to melee bioweapons. We're talking minimal range capability, minimal adaptation patterns, and noticeably less coordination between its swarm organisms compared to basically every other fleet on this list. It's the hive mind's berserker protocol. No feints, no flanking maneuvers, no clever ambush tactics. Just a wall of claws and teeth moving in one direction, forward. Now, you might look at that and think, so it's just Behemoth again. And I get it, but Behemoth was the first major invasion. It was a test, a rough draft. Moloch exists alongside fleets that can tunnel under your planet. Fleets that can predict your tactics years in advance, fleets that wage biological warfare before the first organism even lands. The hive mind has access to genius tier strategy, and it still keeps Moloch around, which tells you something important. Some fans theorize Moloch is a specialized siege breaker, purpose-built to overwhelm fortified defensive positions where subtlety would just waste time. And that tracks. Sometimes the answer to a locked door isn't picking the lock. It's removing the wall the door is attached to. It's the hive mind sledgehammer. Not every problem requires intelligence. Some problems just require more teeth per square meter than the enemy has bullets. But if Moloch represents the hive mind at its most brutally simple, the next fleet is the exact opposite. Kronos. Every fleet we've talked about so far has the same basic philosophy. Run at the enemy really fast and eat them. Kronos looked at that strategy, looked at the pile of dead Tyranids it produced and said no thanks. This is where the hive mind stopped being a zombie horde and started being an actual military. Kronos specializes in range bioweaponry. We're talking heavy venom cannons, barbed stranglers, massive biocannon platforms, all deployed at concentrations higher than any other documented fleet. While Behemoth was busy sprinting into gunfire like a had somewhere to be, Kronos figured out something revolutionary. You can melt your enemies from a distance before you ever close the gap, and that's not an exaggeration. Kronos operates on a coordinated fire support doctrine. Its organisms lay down suppressive biological artillery, shredding defensive formations, dissolving fortifications, and breaking enemy lines before a single melee organism even gets involved. By the time the claws arrive, there's nothing left to fight. Just puddles and screaming. Here's the thing, this represents genuine strategic learning from the hive mind. Behemoth charged Imperial fortifications and got ground down. The hive mind absorbed that data, processed billions of failed engagements, and produced a fleet that simply refuses to play the same game. Instead of throwing bodies at walls, Kronos dissolves the walls first, which is, smarter. Competitive players have debated for years whether Kronos or Leviathan offers better long-range suppression on the tabletop, and the general consensus is that Kronos is massively underestimated. It doesn't get the spotlight because artillery bugs aren't as cinematic as a Carnifex ripping through a tank, but effectiveness doesn't care about cinematics. But if you think a fleet that learned to shoot is impressive, wait until you meet the one that learned to run. Kraken. Every fleet we've talked about so far plays the same basic game. Show up, eat everything, move on. Kraken looked at that playbook and threw it in the trash. This is the hive mind operating like a galactic raiding party, and it might be the most terrifying evolution the Tyranids have ever produced, not because of what it kills, but because of what it destroys without ever fearing a shot. Here's the thing about Kraken, it smashed into the eastern fringe like a tidal wave, hitting each of 4, multiple worlds across Ultima Segmentum, and splitting into dozens of smaller tendrils that struck systems simultaneously. That's not a war, that's a blitz across an entire region faster than most Imperial fleets can even mobilize. It hit supply lines, shredded industrial centers, crippled manufacturing output, and then just moved on. Gone. 3 systems away before the first distress signal even reached command. The organisms themselves reflect this doctrine perfectly. Smaller, faster, built for reconnaissance and rapid strikes rather than prolonged sieges. Kraken doesn't feel the massive bio-titan walls that Behemoth love throwing at fortified positions. It fields things that move like interceptors and hunt like wolves. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. Kraken learned from Behemoth's destruction at McCraig. The hive mind watched an entire fleet get annihilated because it charged a fortified position head-on, and it adapted. Kraken's whole doctrine is the correction. Split apart, attack everywhere at once, never give the enemy a single target to concentrate fire on. And Kraken's victories don't look like victories. There's no extinction event, no scorched world to point at on a star map. There's just an entire sector that can't feed its armies anymore, can't manufacture ammunition, can't repair its ships. Economic collapse disguised as a series of minor raids. By the time anyone pieces together what actually happened, Kraken is already gone. It wins wars that nobody realizes they've already lost. But if a fleet that moves faster than you can think sounds bad, wait until you meet one that attacks from somewhere you'd never think to look. Jormungandr. Every other hive fleet attacks from the sky. Jormungandr attacks from underneath your feet. And that distinction is the reason entire planetary defense networks have collapsed without firing a single shot upward. Named after the mythological Norse war serpent that encircles the earth from below, Jormungandr operates on a doctrine so simple it's almost insulting. Why fight through walls when you can go under them? Why engage fortified positions when you can just pop up behind them? The Imperium spent centuries perfecting orbital defenses, void shields, and anti-air batteries. Jormungandr looked at all of that and said, cool, we'll be underground. Here's how it works. Jormungandr seeds a planet with burrowing bioforms long before the main assault begins. Trigons, Raveners, and Molochs chew through bedrock like it's wet cardboard, creating massive tunnel networks that span entire continents. The defenders above have zero idea any of this is happening. They're watching the skies, scanning for spore pods, reinforcing their walls. Meanwhile, the ground beneath their boots is already hollow. Then the floor opens up. Defensive lines fragment instantly because there is no front line anymore. Every position is compromised. Every bunker has a hole beneath it. Troops that spent months fortifying a choke point suddenly have Tyranid organisms erupting from the ground at point-blank range, and Jormungandr doesn't do range firefights. It does teeth-in-your-face ambushes where the engagement distance is measured in inches. Tabletop players figured this out fast. Jormungandr's deep strike mechanics let you bypass entire gun lines and drop units exactly where they hurt the most. In specific mission types, it's borderline oppressive. Your opponent builds a perfect castle and you just appear inside it, which is, not ideal for them. But if Jormungandr makes you feel like nowhere is safe, wait until you meet the fleet that literally cannot be killed. Hydra. Remember how Behemoth charged straight into the Imperium's guns and got ground down through pure attrition? Yeah, the hive mind remembered too, and it built Hydra specifically to make sure that strategy never works again. Here's the thing about the Imperium's military doctrine. It loves attrition warfare. Throw bodies at the problem, hold the line, outlast the enemy. It's worked for 10,000 years against orcs, chaos, you name it. Hydra is the fleet that makes that entire playbook suicidal. Hydra's defining trait is regenerative capacity so extreme it borders on parity. We're talking about a fleet that can regrow major swarm losses within 3 to 5 solar cycles under favorable conditions. You spend months planning a campaign, sacrifice entire regiments to wipe out a tendril, and by the time you're filing the victory report, everything you killed is already back, possibly in greater numbers. But the regeneration isn't even the scariest part. Hydra operates using multiple parallel command nodes spread across smaller hive ships. instead of relying on one massive flagship. You know how the standard Imperial counter to Tyranids is kill the big synapse creature and watch the swarm fall apart? Hydra looked at that strategy and said no thank you. You can't decapitate a fleet that has 15 heads, which is, not ideal for the people trying to decapitate it, and it gets worse with time. Hydra's regeneration efficiency actually increases with each successive campaign cycle. Every battle makes it faster at replacing what it lost. So the Imperium's go-to move of grinding enemies down through prolonged warfare literally feeds Hydra's core mechanic. You're not weakening it, you're training it. The community has a compelling read on this one. They argue Hydra is direct evidence of the hive mind learning from Behemoth's destruction. Behemoth died because it couldn't sustain losses fast enough. Hydra was the answer. Lose everything, regrow everything, repeat forever. But if Hydra is the hive mind's answer to attrition, wait until you see what Gorgon does to the concept of biological integrity. Gorgon. Every fleet we've talked about so far has one thing in common. They show up and they eat. Gorgon is different. Gorgon shows up, eats, and then evolves past whatever you just threw at it in real time. Here's the thing about most Tyranid invasions. A hive fleet drops out of the void. You hit it with everything you've got, and either that works or it doesn't. With Gorgon, it doesn't matter if it works the first time, because it won't work the second time. Gorgon's entire strategy is rapid biological adaptation. You deploy a toxin that melts through their chitin, give it a few hours. The next wave is immune. You engineer a bioweapon targeting their nervous system. Congratulations, you just taught them how to counter it. Every weapon you use is basically a free tutorial, and it's fast, horrifyingly fast. When Gorgon hit Tau space around 899 M41, the entire campaign lasted roughly 4 years. 4 years to chew through multiple Tau worlds and force one of the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy into full crisis mode. The Tau kept developing new chemical agents and biological countermeasures, and Gorgon kept shrugging them off within engagements. Every adaptation the tool made, Gorgon matched and then exceeded. The arms race was completely one-sided because one side had billions of years of evolutionary engineering backing it up. That's what makes Gorgon genuinely disturbing. It punishes you for fighting smart. The more creative your defenses, the more data you're feeding the swarm. Your best scientists developing targeted bioweapons are basically Gorgon's R&D department, which is, not ideal. There's no winning through innovation against Gorgon because innovation is literally what it feeds on. Every other fleet on this list is a predator. Gorgon is a predator that gets stronger every time you punch it in the mouth. But if a fleet that adapts past every weapon you throw at it sounds bad, wait until you hear about the one that treats entire star systems like a personal farm, Ouroboros. Every hive fleet we've talked about so far has one thing in common. They show up, they eat everything, and they move on. Ouroboros doesn't do that. Ouroboros comes back. This fleet operates on predation cycles stretching over 50 years. It moves through multiple star systems, strips them of biomass, and then circles back to the ones it hit first. And here's where it stops being a predator and starts being something way more unsettling. It's a farmer. Ouroboros doesn't just consume and leave scorched rock behind. It seeds worlds with stable micro-ecosystems of bioforms specifically designed to grow, reproduce, and be harvested later. Let that sink in. It's planting crops. Entire star systems treat it like cultivated gardens. Sow, tend, reap, repeat. 50 years of patience between harvests. Most civilizations can't plan infrastructure projects that far ahead, and this thing is running an interstellar agriculture operation with meat instead of grain. The trade-off is that Ouroboros doesn't carry the sheer biomass of something like Leviathan or Behemoth. It's a leaner fleet, but what it lacks in raw tonnage, it makes up for in terrifyingly efficient resource allocation. Every organism has a purpose. Every system it touches becomes part of the supply chain. Nothing is wasted, nothing is rushed. Now, the lore community has some interesting debates about what this actually means. Some argue Ouroboros is proof that the hive mind has developed genuine long-term strategic thinking, planning decades ahead like a galactic chess player. Others think it's simpler than that. Maybe Ouroboros is just a resource-constrained fleet making the absolute best of limited biomass, because it doesn't have the luxury of brute force. There's even a theory floating around that Ouroboros is quietly guarding breeding grounds, cultivating reserves for a much larger incursion down the line. Either way, the implication is the same. The hive mind isn't just hungry, it's patient. And patience from something that eats stars is genuinely terrifying. But if you think farming worlds is disturbing, wait until you hear what Scylla does to them before the main swarm even arrives. Scylla. Most hive fleets show up and eat you. Scylla sends you a gift basket first. The gift basket is plague. Here's how it works. Roughly 40 to 80 days before the main swarm even enters a system, Scylla deploys weapons weaponized pathogens, and genetic corruption vectors ahead of itself. These aren't random diseases. They're precision-engineered biological weapons designed to shred immune systems, destabilize populations, and turn entire worlds into open wounds. By the time the actual Tyranid organisms arrive, there's barely anything left to fight back. And here's what makes Scylla particularly uncomfortable to think about. It doesn't target military infrastructure first. It targets civilians, the people with zero augmetic immune boosters, zero combat-grade medical support, zero chance. Soldiers in fortified positions might hold out for weeks. The Hab block families 3 sectors over are already dead. Scylla knows exactly where the soft targets are, and it hits them deliberately because a planet full of dying civilians drains military resources faster than any frontal assault ever could. The community has had some genuinely heated debates about whether Scylla's methods would violate the Imperium's equivalent of the Geneva Convention, which is a fun sentence to type about a species with no concept of morality. Fans consistently rank it as the most cruel hive fleet in existence, despite the fact that cruelty requires intent, and the hive mind doesn't have feelings. It's not being sadistic, it's being efficient. The fact that efficiency looks identical to sadism is, not ideal, as that's the real horror of Scylla. It doesn't need claws or biotitans to break a world. It just needs patience and a good recipe for super plague. By the time the teeth show up, the war is already over. The consumption phase is just cleanup. But if Scylla is the hive mind's most unsettling tool, the next fleet is its biggest hammer, and it makes everything we've talked about so far look like a warm-up. Leviathan. Every hive fleet we've talked about so far has a specialty. Speed, stealth, toxins, tunneling, whatever. Leviathan's specialty is being better than you at everything, and getting even better while you watch. This thing arrived from the galactic southeast around 997 M41, and it didn't arrive quietly. We're talking simultaneous multi-pronged assaults across multiple star systems at the same time. Not sequential, simultaneous. While the Imperium was scrambling to respond to one tendril, 3 more were already deep into neighboring systems. The logistical nightmare alone would cripple any military response, and that's before you get to the actual fighting. But here's where Leviathan crosses from dangerous into existential nightmare. Every single battle it fights makes it smarter. It absorbs defeated bioforms, integrates their genetic data into its own archive, and rapidly adapts. You beat a Leviathan swarm with plasma weapons on Monday, and by Thursday the next wave has evolved heat-resistant carapace plating specifically designed to counter plasma. Same thing with Melta, same thing with basically anything you throw at it. Your victories are just free homework for the hive mind. Hey, what killed us last time? Plasma. Cool, fix that. Done? And the truly terrifying part, it's never been defeated. Not really. Every other major hive fleet on this list has a, and then the Imperium stopped it moment somewhere in the lore. Leviathan doesn't. As of M42, it is still actively predating on Imperial space. Still learning, still evolving, still getting worse. Fan consensus almost universally places Leviathan as the single most dangerous hive fleet in canon. And honestly, it's hard to argue. Some people theorize that Leviathan is the hive mind's ultimate expression, the final form, the masterwork. Others think it's just the biggest fleet we've found so far, and that unnamed horrors beyond charted space make Leviathan look like a scouting party, which is, not ideal. But if Leviathan is the hive mind's sword, the next fleet might be something even stranger, something that isn't trying to eat the galaxy at all. Tiamat. Most hive fleets have a thing. Behemoth charges, Kraken flanks, Leviathan adapts. Tiamat does something arguably scarier. It stays put. And I mean stays put in the way a spider sits in the center of its web, not in the way a lazy cat refuses to move off the couch. Here's the thing about Tiamat that separates it from everything else on this list. Every other hive fleet is actively consuming, moving, devouring worlds in a line across the galaxy. Tiamat found a system, the Tiamat system specifically, and just decided to live there. It's not passing through, it's building something. The fleet has been harvesting biomass on the planet Zeophoria to construct a massive organic structure, a psychic beacon of unknown purpose that's been growing for centuries. This isn't a swarm crashing against a wall. This is a swarm that quietly built a cathedral while nobody was looking. The way this terrifies people comes down to what that structure actually does. It generates a powerful psychic signal that reaches deep into space. Some theorize it's a lighthouse, calling other hive fleets toward the galaxy. Others think it's amplifying the hive mind's presence in the region. Nobody knows for certain. Think of it less like a swarm following instinct and more like an architect laying foundations for something humanity can't even comprehend yet. The hive mind isn't just present in Tiamat, it's investing in real estate, and the mortgage plan looks like it spans millennia. Now, newer players sometimes hear stationary hive fleet and think that sounds less dangerous. And that's fair because a fleet that isn't actively eating your planet feels like a lower priority, but the distinction matters. A hive fleet devouring worlds is a problem you can see coming. Tiamat is a problem you won't understand until it's too late. The community debates what that psychic structure's endgame actually is, and honestly, there's no clean answer. But the fact that the hive mind considered one system worth permanently occupying tells you everything about how important this project is. It terrifies through patience, not violence, which is, not ideal for anyone living in the same galaxy. But if Tiamat is the hive mind at its most enigmatically patient, the next fleet might be the hive mind at its most unsettling. Harbinger. Every fleet on this list has shown some version of adaptation. That's what Tyranids do. They fight, they lose something, they evolve past it, they come back meaner. It's horrifying, but it's predictable. But here's the thing that should terrify you more than any single hive fleet. The hive mind itself is getting smarter, not just adapting, learning. Look at the progression. Behemoth was a blunt instrument, a battering ram thrown at Ultramar with zero subtlety. It hit hard, got repelled, and the Imperium thought they'd figured out the playbook. Then Kraken came, splitting into tendrils, flanking, probing weaknesses across multiple systems simultaneously. Leviathan attacked from below the galactic plane, a vector nobody had prepared for. Each fleet represents a generational leap in strategic complexity. That's not random mutation, that's something thinking, but it gets worse. By the Fourth Tyrannic War, the hive mind's tactical sophistication has reached a point where Imperial commanders document Tyranid forces adapting mid-battle in ways that anticipate defensive responses before they're fully deployed. The Swarm doesn't make the same mistake twice. It barely makes mistake once. Every engagement feeds data back into something vast, and what comes out the other side is sharper every single time. There are even documented cases of Tyranid organisms interfacing with Imperial technology in ways that Mechanicus can't explain. Bioforms that neutralize specific weapons platforms they've never encountered before, which is, not ideal. And this is where the community goes full conspiracy board with Redstring, because the question everyone keeps asking is simple. Is there an upper limit? Is the hive mind approaching some threshold where it simply outthinks every possible response before the Imperium can conceive of it? Nobody has a definitive answer. The lore keeps expanding, the canonical picture keeps getting darker, and that makes it worse. Because the smarter this thing gets, the more every previous victory starts looking like the hive mind, letting humanity win to see what they do next. Every other fleet on this list is a threat you can name and quantify. The hive mind's learning curve is the threat you can't even measure, and if each new tendril is exponentially smarter than the last, then every strategy, every weapon, every defense the Imperium builds might already be accounted for. Sleep well. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.